All right, hello everyone. Welcome to episode one of the Data Room. Today, I'm joined by Josh Taylor, my very first guest. I'm super excited to get going. Before we dive into my interview with him, I just want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Jacob Straube. I am a sophomore undergraduate at Rice University from Houston, Texas, and I'm passionate about entrepreneurship. And the reason I started this podcast is I want to learn from successful founders, people who work in startups, and especially my peers. And through collective conversations, through exceptional individuals, I hope to develop a playbook for how to become the best entrepreneur possible. And I want to share that playbook with the world and hopefully help some people achieve success. So without further ado, Josh, how about you go ahead and introduce yourself?
What's up, everybody? Super excited for this and whatever it's going to become. There are no limits, right? I'm Joshua Taylor. We're here in the H in Houston, Texas. Intro that could be really short or really long. I'm 30 years old or young. I guess from an entrepreneurial perspective, I have a finance economics background, and I spent just under 2 years in banking. A lot of that was on the debt side. Did a couple M&A transactions, and one real estate deal. I got bored, wanted to go on the buy side and work at a hedge fund. Was interviewing. Lo and behold, in 2016, slipped into entrepreneurship with my older brother, and we really set out to really connect people in a different way, particularly in through long distance ride sharing. The vision was through if we could connect through people through every mode of transportation, whether you're on a plane, a bus, a car, that'd be really cool. We thought we could scale long distance ride sharing, such as BlaBlaCar did in Europe. Lo and behold, there are a lot of factors that weren't applicable in the United States versus Europe for several reasons. We had a lot of pivots within the travel space and then eventually what Guzo is today, um, a cloud and marketplace for organizations and communities. And I spent 5 years going through that. We raised over $1 million through a lot of struggles. And I just wore all the hats besides developing and learned a lot. Now I transitioned from that in 2021, hit up 800 people on LinkedIn because I did not know what I was going to do in my life. But, worked at a crypto startup for 2021 for the second half and started venture scouting for a New York-based venture fund. And now I'm full-time at a venture capital firm here in Texas called Capital Factory. So startup world is a big part of my career and investing in startups. So that's the short story.
That's awesome, man. A lot of great things that I'd love to dive into as we go throughout the podcast. But my first question is, why did you agree to come on?
Well, I met you not even a month ago, at the beginning of the year. My brother actually talked about you a lot and just
Really?
really was impressed with you. And so when I met you, I was like, let's see what this dude's about. And you're very curious. And I think an entrepreneur or an investor just has to, or any person that wants to live a life that's worth living or be their best has to
Hmm.
be curious to find out more. Might as well like Curious George flashback in my head right now.
Yeah,
If you don't know what that is, just look it up. It's pretty cool, like little kid show back in the day.
absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely.
I don't know when it was created, but anyways, you were just really curious, and I could tell you were hungry for more and knowledge and your learnings. You were already doing we're doing now, right? You're already asking me a ton of questions about my entrepreneurial journey and just who I was as a person and just trying to learn. But I could tell you're really curious about me. And so when we started talking about the podcast, I had my own ideas for it and
Yeah,
things like that. I had podcasted before as well. That's what helped me get into crypto was just like interviewing leaders in the space and trying to see how the future is going to be in Web3 and all these cool things. And I still think that's applicable because of the technological shifts that we're going through.
yeah,
And so I think for a lot of, as we're in the entrepreneurial wave right now, this decade, I think it's cool that you're crowdsourcing this knowledge for yourself, but it's gonna be really helpful for a lot of people, young and old.
for sure.
Because if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you're a first-time entrepreneur. You don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of the things I keep hearing about is, when I tell people I want to be an entrepreneur, a lot of people kind of resort to the statistics and they just tell me like, oh, what's the odds like you create something successful? And my response to that is always just like, why would I ever compare myself to anyone else? Like, we're all on our own journey. We all have our different priorities. We all have our different skill sets, and we just got to do the best with what we have. And like, why would I ever compare myself to anyone else? And that's something that I think is valuable. And I know that in the startup world, there's a lot of failures. I'm not oblivious to that fact, but I just have to keep believing that I'm going to be one of the successes.
Yeah.
Um, so with that, based on some of your experience working in startups, working on the Ion day to day, which I think is super cool. What's been on your mind recently?
Yeah. A lot of things.
Yeah.
Play on mine right running right now. Um, I think like as a in the venture capital space, right? I'm probably talking to like six companies today, five or six. Um, so I'm always attempting to learn,
Mm,
uh, whether it's from a founder, um, just how to look at a different company and how they're really trying to impact their space. Since because we were a generalist fund and we're geographical focus. But I think for the last year, I've just been trying to see what's out there. What's out there that's really cool that I am excited about personally, and I think could like really change the world or change an industry. Or really has a cool problem, and a lot of people or organizations need this.
mm,
And really, just how I look at a deal, look at a company, and how do can I really understand it?
mm.
Right? I don't have a healthcare background. We're in Houston.
Right.
There's a lot of healthcare, energy companies, but it's how you look at it. And like, really, what brought me to this podcast was your curiosity. So,
Yeah.
if I can be curious and learn really quickly, it can help me process information. And I think for me, naturally being on the operator side early on in my career, when I was a little bit older than you, was really understanding how to go and build a business from scratch. And so, since that's my background, um, I think now it's just like, man, how do companies scale? Right? When they figured out their customer, they know they have a product. Maybe it's, of course, products always need to improve in offering,
Right.
but like people are actually paying for it. And how do you do that at scale? How do you go to different segments and markets? Because I've done with our startup cruising and Guzo, like hey, just trying to figure it out, right? Trying to talk to thousands of
Right.
people, talking to organizations. So I think that's been on my mind a lot from an entrepreneur's perspective. Like you figured it out, now what? How do you really get to scale?
Yeah.
And I know every business isn't a startup and trying to scale up. But yeah.
Awesome. You kind of brought up one of the questions I love to ask in my class last semester when we had VCs come in,
Mm,
and that is, as kind of a more generalist fund, like everyone has a certain skill set, right?
mm,
How do you go about educating yourself about some of the more like niche companies? Maybe they're very specific to a certain industry you don't have very much experience with. How do you approach that? Do you rely on a network of peers? Do you read certain information? How do you
yeah,
go about that process?
that's a great question. Like I think like one of the things that a lot of companies that we don't think about is like competition. And it's not big companies, it's like other small startups that are doing the same thing as you.
Mhm.
And so since we're a generalist fund, we have a large network of investors. We'll usually reach out to peers if it's something like super deep tech or super specific that we don't know about. And like you're doing, like crowdsourcing information in a sense.
Yeah.
I think it's also challenging the entrepreneur and knowing how to ask questions. Not necessarily to trick them, but to, put them through the rigor or just
Right.
understand, like, do you really understand your business? Do you really understand the X's and O's? And then do you know your competition?
Yeah.
Because if you don't know it, like, I think there's a middle ground between knowing your competition versus just focusing on them versus just what makes you better
Yeah.
in the marketplace, right? Like you said, you're so focused on the statistics of what they say versus like, I'm just going to scale up and be the best, right? That's what the entrepreneur is, especially at a startup. You believe you're the best person to solve this problem.
Right.
You're the warrior. You're the one person who
Absolutely.
can do this. And whatever you can't do, just like we do in analyzing a company or market mapping, as we do sometimes, like we're trying to understand the industry. What are the
Mhm.
gaps, but also what's the competition? Because what you don't know can kill you.
Right. Now, you mentioned like as a founder, you want to be the best person. And you even mentioned a warrior, like the one is a warrior quote.
Yeah.
I know that quote. I love that quote.
Yeah.
Um, but you mentioned like as a founder, right? You want to be the very best person to solve that issue. And so from your experience looking as down as a VC, what do you see among these entrepreneurs? What makes them the best to solve that problem?
That's great. I think like since you're at Rice and a lot of students, even like the startup myth is that Mark Zuckerberg was in his dorm room, Michael Dell, Evan Spiegel, all these great guys, right? People, which they are definitely unicorns in themselves, but like the average entrepreneur is older,
Mm,
right? Like in their 40s. They've been in industries specifically for like 10, 20 years at a specific energy company or something supply chain, or maybe they have been in social networks for a while and they found a problem within it because they know it.
yeah,
And so that's one thing that I see. I think the myth is also like people think like Mark Zuckerberg like sold an app when he was like 18,
yeah.
right? Like these people have done a short, like they were already grinding, they were already getting their compounded interest before their big hit came.
Mhm.
I think also great entrepreneurs have failed before. They failed at a startup. So,
Yeah.
or maybe this was their second go around, whether they've had successful exit or it's their like second or third startup, or they've been at startups before that have either scaled up and been successful and they branch off. That's why you see like, Uber and like Lyft people, or I was a former Airbnb, or I was
Yeah.
former, all the startups you don't even know that are successful that are great companies. They just don't get out the limelight.
Mhm.
I think also like they're just very resourceful. They're very resourceful. They're very tactful, and like I said, they really know their industry.
Mhm.
Like it's like the impressive kid in class. Maybe they're not just like the brainiac valedictorian, but like you could just tell that they're prepared all the
Right.
time. Um, and from a level, they just know the processes of how to go about it. Even if this is their first startup, particularly,
Yeah.
I think they just come into the meeting at another level of understanding their industry, understanding their customer and what they're going after, but also the best ones can explain how it's going to be a big business. And then the last thing I think is they they really like they don't come they're not desperate. Like they're like they know who they are. They know like if you're a talented founder and have a good business, right? It's like the attractive person in the room that
Yeah.
has confidence, right? And so they're on that mission and they're like, hey, like whether you come in or not, like this is gonna
Yeah.
get done. And not in an arrogant way. I think it's really like they understand the game of the art of fundraising and they have some skill set. And they really know how to build relationships. So it's like a founder really wears a lot of hats if you're the CEO,
Yeah.
right? CTOs could be like very skilled as well in that regard because they have to lead people as they scale up. Um, but I think the best founders I've seen, they're just they know how to work with people and know how to like build relationships. They understand the game
Mhm.
of, I guess you could say, the war of business, because there's a lot of strategy and it's a relationship business, and when people are investing in you. So
Yeah. No, absolutely. A ton of great
yeah,
insight there.
yeah,
That
I
was
just
that
thrown
was
it,
really great.
and I could keep going, but yeah.
I'm definitely gonna watch this part back because a lot of great things you said. One of the things I want to talk to you a little bit more about is the idea of like failing.
Mhm,
And in Rice entrepreneurship undergraduate, they teach about the idea of failing upward
mhm,
and kind of learning from your failures. Right. Even an entrepreneur that is successful with their very first company, they've still experienced some failures in their life. Everyone experiences failure. What is your relationship with failure, and how do you view it for you personally? How has it improved?
yeah,
And then how do you view it in general in the entrepreneurship ecosystem?
yeah. I wonder what the stat is on like first successful startups. I bet like people that how many founders have succeeded in their first startup.
Yeah,
That
I'm
would
not
be a
sure.
great
Maybe we'll
stat.
put it
It's
on the screen.
Yeah, it's probably really low. But even within that, I was thinking as you talk, like a lot of founders, like you're like you said, you're failing a lot of times, right? Before you even get product market fit, before you find your first customer, your first 10 people, or your first 100 views on the same or listens, right?
Yeah.
And so you could call those failures. Or if we stumble across a word in this podcast, right? And you're like, oh my God, I'm nervous. And so I think that that's that part. For me specifically, I ran track in college. I think in high school, even in college, I wouldn't say a sore loser, but I would just beat myself up.
You're a
If,
competitor.
yeah, if I dropped a pass, I played football in high school, decided not to play in college, but uh, I would just really beat myself up, and it took me a long time to be more kind to myself.
Hmm.
And I think that's more the deep work that we have to do with ourselves and realize why those things happen.
Yeah.
And realize that you're a process, or that you're a project. You're yourself as a project, and it's fun. Have fun with building yourself. There's times
Yeah.
where, depending on your situation in life, where you just got to grind. But I think within that, I think great entrepreneurs as well take a step. You have to take a step outside of your business, outside of that failure, whether it was a long experience or just you're failing at a customer call or someone doesn't, use your product or whatever. It's take yourself outside of that and try to understand why. And that's why it goes back to the curiosity, because a curiosity is like it's an input, right?
Hmm.
Like if you're just so focused on the output, right? Like you're just gonna be like, I need to get this customer, I need to get these views. But no, it's
Yeah.
like if your focus is on the bolts and meats, like that's when you get really good at the skill. That's when you get really good at interviewing people. That's how you get really good at selling to people. That's how you get really good at developing
Yeah.
products or video editing. When you're just trying, that's how you really go upward.
Hmm.
And so back to me, I really was, I had to really be conscious effort, right? To really like understand like, hey, this is just one experience, right? And like, okay, how could I really learn from this? What really happened?
Right.
So I think from that perspective, even within entrepreneurship, right? Because I mean, it was 5 years, we had still not been successful,
Yeah.
and like Guzo really didn't like start having big customers, real customers until the end of last year, towards the end, second half of last year. And so I think from that perspective was just first, like continuing to learn and be curious.
Hmm.
Second, not forgetting the big picture of why you're doing this.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the suck, like when life is not going your way, like when you don't have a why and you're just focused on the results,
Yeah.
um, that's when it's not going to last for you. And so I think like that goes back to like successful entrepreneurs. And why I enjoy this space is because people that really have a why that's bigger than themselves,
Yeah.
that's a special founder. So I found it in myself to remember the why, but also the nuts and bolts of improving how I think about it, but also like the execution
Hmm.
of how I could, continue to level up as well.
Awesome. Yeah, you mentioned like when you're in the suck, and that's something that like being in college right now, a lot of my peers are kind of like going through it academically, and
Yeah,
there's even times where I have quite a bit of work on my plate.
yeah,
Um, but when I'm kind of comforting those peers or talking to those peers, I always find myself saying, like you might view it as like this sucks in the moment, but it's really beneficial to you if you can just view it as this is why you're at Rice. This is what you signed up for. This is true learning in action. Like it seems like a grind, it seems kind of brutal, but that's why we're here and that's making us better people.
yeah,
And it kind of, for me, it all goes back to this idea that one of the most important things in life overall that I believe is the narrative that you tell yourself. And I think for me, it's been really grounding to always have a narrative that I'm telling myself. I know what goals I'm working towards, and that helped me personally work through some of my past failures because I know that even if I failed at something, it still got me closer to my overall goal. So with that in mind, what kind of narrative do you tell yourself? Like, especially real quick to preface is like I come from tennis. You play football and track. I play tennis, and in tennis, it's just you and your opponent one on one for 2 hours, and you talk to yourself almost the entire match.
yeah,
And a lot of players even talk out loud. And I've seen really good players that are just stone cold the entire time. I've seen people scream at themselves.
yeah,
Um, what is your kind of relationship with your own personal narrative, and what do you tell yourself?
yeah. The narrative. That's dope. Um, Yeah, like I think it even goes back to the track days, right? Like I said, or even entrepreneurship when I would get frustrated or upset, um, that I had to work on that narrative for myself and really realize that like today's a new day. I have new mercies. Like I was yelling at myself today. And literally like, let's freaking go. Like, like and even with my faith, like I was just practicing like encouraging myself. And so I think that the way I look at my life now is, a little bit more experience is just looking at myself and then, like I said, like the long term and the short term. Like I'm looking at like, dang, how am I going to be in the end of this decade?
Yeah.
Right. But remembering in the process, like I'm a project. Like I'm a project. That's really what I've been saying.
Mhm.
The hard last year, I'm a process. I'm a project. Like I'm building the pieces every day to my life. And so I just keep telling myself that. And some of the bigger audacious goals that I'm doing, like the marathons, like that I'm running or things like that,
Yeah.
I'm just like, who else would be doing this? Like, who else? I don't have to do these things, right? You don't have to be the best version of yourself. Like, it's a choice, right? A lot of us are blessed to have free will,
Absolutely.
and so you don't have to be pushing yourself, but it's a privilege. And I was
Absolutely.
talking with the founder that. And so like just the process of a project, it's always under construction. And then like it's really a privilege. Like it is Rice. Like Rice is one of the best
100%.
schools in the country, even arguably in the world. So it's like it's a privilege to be there. And I think that remembering what really got you first excited, that's what keeps the why. So like I think a short term and a long term perspective always keeps you balanced and just reminding yourself that you're a process, you're a project, right? Like if you had a 30-year time horizon, you're not going to give up in year two just because, like,
Yeah.
and so that's how you see beautiful cities come about because, hey, it might not change in a day or a house or like I'm watching like this building being built every day. I pass it up. I'm going to look at it every day to see the progress. And probably if like, I don't know, 40 years up, that building's going to be done.
Yeah.
And so that's the compounded interest of reminding yourself, okay, it's a new day. Yesterday might have been crappy, but it's a new opportunity. And so I would say I really got a lot better at that in the last 3 years, but definitely the last 2 years I was
Awesome.
better at saying the process on the project that has a 30, 50, 70, 100 year
Yeah.
timeline. And you just, hey, today's a privilege.
I really like that. There's a Tony Robbins quote where he says most people underestimate what they can do in a year
Yeah.
and underestimate what they can do in 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's true. Like people, I think sometimes it's easy to just focus on the negative in the short term
Mhm.
and think about all the reasons why you can't make something happen. But when you put it in a longer time frame, it's like easier to see all the upside
Mhm.
and it's easier because you can think about you can see the long-term goal and not have to worry about all the little nuances.
Yeah.
And like through the process, you'll figure those things out.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads me into my next question, which is like if you're framing yourself in kind of these 10-year time horizons or 5 to 10 year, whatever time horizon it is, just longer term,
Yeah.
I think habits become one of the most important things. Habits are things we do each and every day,
Yeah.
and they really contribute to a huge part of like who we are. And I think a lot of people just kind of pick up habits and they don't really think critically about why they do these things, but they're so important because they happen every single day. So, what are some habits that you've adopted over the years that have contributed to some of your present success and that you're going to take with you as you pursue future endeavors?
I was talking to someone about this yesterday. I was like,
Mhm.
one is just like during a startup, right? We were broke because a lot of my savings went towards the startup. And I was like unintentionally or inherently intermittent fast
Mhm.
because I was either broke, just working
Just
so
working,
much,
yeah.
and that just became a habit. And that kind of kept me lean. Everyone has different body types. It's cool. But now it really has helped me discipline eating healthier and just having different decisions. Like we are what we eat and that really affects our performance on a day in and day out basis. I think for me, since like I was an athlete, like I realized how much my body, my as a machine, needs physical fitness.
Yeah.
And so I've really been focusing on, I work out, and if I miss it in the morning, like honestly, I missed it this morning because sleep is important. I used to think I wasn't banking it. the grind, but like sleep is super important. So I'm gonna run the night. I'm gonna get it in.
Mm,
So and then I read a lot.
yeah.
I read or listen to books a lot. And so just continually those little things of either morning or night, like training my mind besides just the work.
Yeah.
And so I think depending on your career, like early starting off, it's great to do things you want to do and like, so you actually are getting the reps at work. Everybody has different situations where they just gotta grind and survive at points. I know it's hard out there for a lot of people. But I think like, just the little things like I do physical fitness, I do mental fitness, right? And spiritual fitness. I try to get those in every day. And then like part of the physical is like the rest,
Mhm.
trying to get the rest as well. So those things I do pretty decently. I'm still working on them, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned a lot of those. I mean, I feel like I've been on a pretty similar trajectory between talking to you, talking to other entrepreneurs. I definitely notice a common theme of the gym or some kind of physical activity is very important. Even last year, I was at an event with one of my professors outside the classroom, and I was asking him, like, Professor Butler, like, dropped some advice, and he's like, it's really important to find an exercise routine that you can stay committed to long term because physical exercise is just so great, not only for your body, but also your mind. And so, one of the things I've been doing personally is 6 a.m. gym. And for me, I'm not able to always get 8 hours of sleep. That's something I'm still working on.
Yeah.
But 6 a.m., it's a very concrete goal. Like every single morning or 5 days a week, 5 days a week, I have a very concrete goal. I know exactly where I need to be and when. And that really helps me kind of frame the rest of my day. And it's been really, really beneficial for me so far.
Yeah.
And another habit that I've been working on, just like you said, is reading. I would say in high school I was a big reader, maybe up to like freshman, sophomore year. And then after that, I got in way more into video games and other things, started watching a lot more YouTube instead
Yeah.
of reading.
Yeah.
And I think or I know, recently I started reading a book for a class and I could tell like my reading skills. I mean, obviously I could still read, but I wasn't as quick, I wasn't as sharp, I wasn't absorbing the information as effectively. And so since then, I've been making a point to read as well. And I try to read financial newsletters in the morning, and then I have one in the afternoon, and then one book that I'm working on in the evenings. And that's been really helpful just to sharpen up some of those reading skills for me. So, with that, is there any specific books or newsletters or maybe even podcasts that you'd like to shout out?
Yeah. Oh, snap. Since I guess and I've been working on like the habits of listening to podcasts because it's like you can only absorb so much information very well. And so I guess I just read this, I just listened to a in January, I listened on Audible called, I listened to like two or three books in the last month, but one was called, I really like Go Giver. It's a very short listen. It's only like 2.5 hours, but it really talks about how you could be a go-getter, but in flipping that to being a go-giver, just how I'm giving my time with
Absolutely.
young lad Jacob here, and just really having a dope conversation and answering questions and giving my perspective with nothing in return. It just talks about this young guy, this older guy who's very successful, and the young guy is just like he's super hungry and he's just telling him how to give and add value to people. And then that will give you things in return. And so very known principle,
Yeah.
but I thought it was really good because of kind of unofficial mentor of mine, a friend of mine, last year told me to read it. And he's like, he saw that in me, that I was, I was a giver and really, I guess, trying to push me towards that. And I think that the Gen Z generation, which I'm like kind of a cusper, I'm born 92, so low key. So just, I think because of the world, not things, people, Gen Zs potentially want to give more. And there's like
Mm.
this other cool book I haven't read in a while, but it's called The Fourth Turning. So it talks about these four stages of life of generations in the life cycle and how we're in the fourth turning and a lot of the things we're going through today. I'm actually listening to Atomic Habits right now.
Oh, no. My roommate is reading that
Yeah,
right
so
now.
I'm listening to it. It's a really great book. Like it just scientifically helps you understand why you do certain things. Why you're on the phone on the toilet, like, and you just do that. Why you look on your phone like first thing in the morning as well. And the book that I'm actually reading is Startup Success by our chairman of our fund, Gordon Daugherty. It's really cool for early stage funding success. It's a great book, Startup Success, Gordon Daugherty. I highly recommend it. He's a two-time entrepreneur. He took a company public when his company got acquired. Really amazing guy, Capital Factory. And then podcast. Since I'm in Web3, I listen to Bankless. I listen Delphi podcast sometimes, and then of course just the Blockworks Media, and then I think there's a lot of entrepreneurship ones that I will listen to, um, like Greatness, or My First Million. Sometimes I used to listen to that, but I haven't listened to it in a while. There's too many podcasts
Yeah,
to be honest, but it's cool. Everyone should have one if they just want to do better at building their network or medias. But I like to read.
so that's awesome. So something I want to really pick your brain about is you said like there's too many podcasts out there, and I
Mhm.
think you bring up a great point is that there's actually quite a few resources out there for the kind of things we were trying to do.
Yeah,
And beyond that, there's quite a few resources out there for everything. We can basically learn anything we want anytime through
yeah,
the internet.
yeah.
How do you personally like prioritize or create a hierarchy for the different kinds of things you want to learn about and the different skill sets that you want to develop?
That's good. That's good. I'm actually going to do this right now. I think it's like really being honest with yourself and saying what's the highest priority. So, like for instance, like what's the highest priority for you at this time, right? So it's like if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to learn the basics, like you just need to learn about what is entrepreneurship, how does it work, right? Just learning the overall thing. So maybe it's just that, or maybe it's like, hey, I want to learn how to sell more. Well, just focus on that for a while,
Mhm.
right? But if you know, like, you want to be a developer, right? Go extremely deeply on that, right? Maybe it's like, I think you could do two skills. It's like juggling, right? So I think there's only so many things you could do in life until like you just drop all the balls,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So I think there's literally like say there's three skills you want to learn. Like you should keep it at a max three skills that you're trying to learn because eventually like you're just going to be mediocre at all the skills.
Mhm.
So for me, it's like learning how to sell and learning like really strategic operations. So like, sales partnerships, but also, working within a company. So it's like learning like how P&Ls, financial budgets work and learning that within the operation. So that might be a little marketing. It's like I'm never going to be a developer. It's just too late. Like, maybe I will. I've actually thought about this. So I'm talking like this is real. It's like, would it be cool to be a developer, like, and just learn the skill? I know how product roadmaps work. I know dev. I know like code stack, but like, I can't just get in the code base with you and like nerd out. So
Right.
is that worth it if I want to continue to be in tech and learn, right? Potentially, but do I really need that? If it's something like I want to be great executive, like go on a founding team, it's not going to be something that's like my skill set. So I'm already forward facing a lot. I already, sales. I already know how to build partnerships. I already know how to build relationships. Like I've worked in a startup, so I know how things run, right? At the beginning stages, at least very well. And so just, I think it's really prioritizing where do you want to fit in a business and what's going to be like your superpower,
Right.
right? So hopefully that was helpful.
No, for sure, for
Lily.
sure. That's right now, like you use the word superpower. I mean, I think working so far, I've been working at Guzo a few weeks, and I think most of my value has come just from my curiosity and my general knowledge of business. I think as if that's going to be my greatest asset, I think this podcast is literally the best possible thing I can do
Mhm.
to keep working on that.
Yeah,
And so that's honestly, you're the one that really pushed me to start this because it's something I've been thinking about a long time.
yeah,
I always found myself on calls with entrepreneurs, with VCs, but this is making it real, is making it official, and I think it's going to be a really big step. And now I want to go back to kind of what you were talking about earlier about how do you kind of determine the hierarchy of your priorities. I think you brought up a really good point, and that is look at look at where you are and like look at where you want to go. See kind of where your long-term goals come into play Like I mentioned earlier, like my long-term goals have been such a source of grounding for me, and I think that's great advice for other people as well. If you know where you want to be, it can really help you in the short term plan and prepare for that,
Yeah,
but also not, sweat the small stuff
yeah,
too much.
yeah.
Um, and now I want to kind of pivot the conversation a little bit. Who's someone that you look up to? It could be a family member, famous entrepreneur, whoever.
Yeah. I think on the mental side, David Goggins, shout out.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I'm running a marathon every state for charity, for adults with special needs. So I really want him to run a marathon with me.
That would be
And
awesome.
then we just yell "Stay hard" for 3 hours. So. I've been following him since like 2017. Really, my brother and my dad. Really, being a younger brother and us working on a startup together and just doing life together. He's definitely he's my hero.
Mm.
And my dad just was a strong man, very smart man, and carried his family. And so those guys, there's a lot of great entrepreneurs out there, a lot of amazing people I get to meet. Um, you know, but when you really know people, right, and see their hard work, see their grind, and see their minds, I've just been very fortunate to say that I looked up to those men. But there's a lot of great people. I remember I met uh, John Rogers when I was really into public equities. He runs Ariel Investments out of Chicago. They called him like the Black Warren Buffett. But he was like, run Area Investments, him and Melody Hobson, great funds. There's a lot of people I try to take little things
Yeah.
from. So I would say like maybe you have like your person like, man, David Goggins is great, or maybe it's Elon Musk, or maybe it's I don't know, Gordon Daugherty. He's not like on scale, but like just great people. There's a lot of great people you can learn with. But those are, I would say, my top two that came to my mind.
Awesome. And spending that much time with your dad and your brother,
Mhm.
like what are some of the deepest lessons that they've taught you? Like what stuck with you the most?
Character, character. Um, like as an entrepreneur, right? It's not about you. When you put this into the world, like you put this pod into the world, this media company, right? It's no longer yours. You share it with others. I think that's even any entity you form, and even yourself, it has to be protected. It's like a dream, right? It is, you have to protect that dream. But at the same time, being able to galvanize and bring people to listen and or watch, but also to your company, right? You're that visionary. How do you inspire people and bring that? And so that really you could be Adam Newman, and like you're just good at that.
Yeah.
But I think what matters most, like when your experiment, your project is over, right? That's what's gonna matter is your character. At the end of the day, all the X's and O's and being a great visionary for the world is great, but what are people gonna say about you when it's all over, when the book closes?
Mm.
I think character came to my mind first because it's like it matters, and like that's how you really attract talent and attract the best people. And that's why people, even if you think about like the biggest companies like a Facebook, people really enjoyed being there for so long at one point in time because like it really was changing the world. It really
Yeah.
was like exciting. It really got a lot of smart, cool people. They had their own nation,
Hmm.
as Reid Hoffman says in Blitzscaling. Love that book. You're building a nation when you're trying to build a company that can
Yeah.
be built to last. So I think it's always the character that embodies the community.
And kind of going off that idea of like character, how would you say you've changed the most in the
Sheesh.
past 5 years?
Oh my gosh, dude, we're gonna be in an hour. Um, I've changed in one how I treat myself. That was a big thing. Like not trying to seek outcomes. That was a huge growth area for me that I was a project because I sought my value from awards, right? Like when you're an all-American athlete or you perform at any high level, grades, whatever, and we all do it. Everyone like everyone sees status as something to marvel.
Mhm.
right? And that's why like we always look at the celebrities or those people, but it's like there's so many people doing great work. Or so many founders that exit and you never know them. You walk by them and you're just like you don't know that they're probably worth eight figures easily. And so it's just like I think it's really just knowing who you are and knowing who I am. That's how it really what helped me over the last 5 years. And like entrepreneurship taught me a lot about myself.
Yeah.
Like that's what it's going to teach you who you are in the hard moments, who you are in the good moments, and in betweens, and like just really balancing the ebbs and flows of life. Right. That's what it taught me was most like internally.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of skills I've learned, but like man, the true battles with oneself. So we can get philosophical here, but I think that's the biggest thing was me learning in the last 5 years, 25 to 30, was like how to be better in my mind and how to take it day at a time instead of uh, just being patient with the results.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say for a 30-year-old, you seem very wise. Like you've been through a lot of you have the relevant financial experience, you have the entrepreneurship experience,
Mm.
you have kind of a very, I would say like a good self-awareness in a good way. And you definitely seem like you have your priorities in line. So with all of
All the
that,
time.
with all that going for you, what kind of goals are you pursuing right now?
Yes. That's a great question. I think for me, like it's always about my faith. So I'm really working on, and it's more the internal work. It's just, really letting me go. So really I could be filled with something that's higher. And for me, that's God. And then like really family. That's my family that I have, like in my biological family, but also just friends and community and network. And how can I really cultivate relationships? And that's within business, because I believe business is personal, because we're all people, we're beings. And then lastly is helping others. So I'm doing that through my career. And so like helping other startups continue to build community, and specifically one part of that is Africa. I went to Africa last year, went to Ghana, and being African American, that completely changed my life. I've been wanting to go for a long time. And so I really focused on building our community throughout the diaspora of the world. And so just want to be the best I can be in the startup investing.
Mhm.
And so really for me, it's just like playing the asset game now. I sacrificed a lot of my career early on, like towards the startup. And so just building myself up so I can invest and build more, and being open to opportunities. And then last but not least, like I'm raising $5 million, Run from the Heart. It's Houston-based nonprofit, the Heart Program, and helping adults with special needs, jobs, opportunities, and training. And so I'm running my out of 50 marathons in April.
Nice.
I'm running 8 more marathons this year, and we got a lot of money to raise. So that for me, the special needs community has a lot of opportunities of things they could solve, and they need help, and they need to be realized. And so that's something that's on my heart. So it's community building, building great businesses, and helping the voiceless have a voice.
That's awesome. I love that. I think I can definitely relate to all of those. One specific thing I want to bring up is I'm also part of an organization that helps people with special needs. It's called Acing Autism, and we help people with autism learn how to play tennis, especially kids, especially. And
Super dope.
it's a really good time, and it definitely constantly reminds me about how lucky I am and how much I have to give because I've been playing tennis a long time. And for me, something that may seem very simple is to them, they've never learned how to hit a certain tennis shot before, so things like that. And being able to teach those people has been really, really awesome. It helps put a lot of things in perspective for me, and I'm really glad that that's been part of my life.
Yeah, I didn't know that. You didn't
Yeah,
even tell me that.
yeah.
That's dope.
Like I think giving back to your community is it's super important, and it's something that like a lot of people kind of just throw it around as like you got to give back to your community.
Yeah,
But I think being part of Acing Autism, and I've done other things in the past too, like those experiences really stuck with me.
yeah,
And I think that's a big part of why I wanted to be an entrepreneur, why I'm doing this. It's not for myself, it's for the world. Like I really do want to help people ultimately. That's my goal. Like
mhm,
in my financial management class last semester, I was introduced to this concept of NPV, like net present value. And within businesses, it's all about creating positive net present value. And for me, and I hope all the viewers and you and everyone at the Ion, everyone that's in a place to make a change in the world, like I hope we're all thinking about how can we contribute positive NPV to the world. That's another thing I hold really close to my heart. So now we're almost out of time here. I want to ask just two more questions. Um, my first question is, what advice would you have for me personally? And this
Yeah,
can be not only everything we discuss here, but everything you know about me up to this point.
man. Like I said, we were both drawn to each other. That's why we just kept hanging out and answering questions to each other. But I said, man, just keep doing what you're doing. Like, keep bringing people on. Like we've talked about in this, like, it take a long-term approach to it. Like as Naval said, founder evangelist. And I'm sure a lot of people may know who he is and they watch this.
Hmm.
Impatience with the work, patience with the results. Right? Like I
I
love
like
that.
that.
Like
I like
just
that.
keep working on this. Like in a year you'll look back and be, oh, it's cool. No matter what the subscriber count is. It's just
Hmm.
like you've crowdfunded all this information for you, but for others, for other young entrepreneurs, or just people, you may be 40 and say, hey, I want to start something. People could go and look. And so it's like, hey, this is for the first time entrepreneur, or this is for all the people who are going to start a business, a medium size, or maybe the next billion trillion dollar company. Who knows, right? It's all about the net present value,
Yeah.
right? Like a banker, no. You could be a banker and create some change too. So no, keep doing what you're doing. Uh, impatient with the work, impatient with the results, and like I think from our conversation we had the first day, it's like don't give up on those dreams,
Hmm.
right? I think critically think about them,
Yeah.
right? And always be working on them in your head, but have a limitless mindset. Those are the people who really change the world, or if they change their family tree, or they change their community. Everybody won't do things at scale, but we could all be a part of that process of being a better version of ourselves, our communities, and potentially the whatever country you're in or the world. And so,
Yeah. I
uh,
really I really appreciate that. That's awesome to hear. I'm gonna remember that quote. I really like that.
yeah,
And my last question is, so that was some selfish advice for me. Now, what advice would you have for the viewers, for the listeners? I think initially, hopefully, a lot of the listeners are going to be some of my peers,
yeah.
maybe my family members. What kind of advice would you have for them?
Oh man, So, don't follow people you wouldn't want to be like. So a part of that means in your early years is maybe you're hanging out and you know you should be studying, or you're doing things you really are not. You're doing it because you're following. Don't follow. Lead yourself. Everybody has different frameworks in terms of what their faith is or what they believe in. Everybody wants different things out of life, but I think if you want to live a life that you're like proud of, um, I would say like follow because it's like actually improving your life.
Right.
Sometimes you have to follow before you can lead. So we don't need a bunch of leaders out there. Everyone's a leader because that's not how it works. That's a whole nother podcast. But I think like follow because it's making you a better person. Don't just follow the crowd. And within following and leading, like figure out yourself and what you like because it'll help change the trajectory of your life and where you want to go. So like figure out oneself first as you're building the blocks to your life. Don't just go, 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 go. You're not really thinking about each step you take because you'll look up and you're like, dang, like, who am I for real? Like, do it early so you can be on that path um, to fulfill whatever, has been put inside you.
Yeah. Oh man, it's been an absolute pleasure. A ton of great insight, great advice. This has got me super excited for future episodes. You're a phenomenal first guest. I
Yeah,
really thank you so much for coming on.
yeah,
And like I mentioned, you literally are the one that pushed me to start it now. Like it was on my mind for probably about a year at this point, and I was getting more and more serious, but I didn't have like final last straw to really do it.
yeah,
And after talking to you, like you mentioned that first day we met. I checked my phone and we've been talking for an hour and a half. Like it was crazy.
Yeah,
But again, like thank you for coming on.
bonus in itself,
It
right?
was, that was. But it's been a great time. Tons of phenomenal insight. I'm definitely gonna look back and I really appreciate it. Thank you so
Yeah,
much, man.
for sure. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.